The Brunali ambassador cackled as he watched footage of human soldiers and dogs training, boasting aloud, "What a primitive army! That rabble would be crushed under a single crystalline boot of a Brunali marine. I almost feel sorry for those backwater pups." Lawrence Shaw ground his teeth, his fists clenched tight as the mocking alien laughter echoed down the embassy hall. The grizzled marine took a deep breath, then stepped into his quarters, kneeling down to ruffle the fur of his loyal German shepherd. "Don't worry, Ranger. We'll teach those pompous crystal humpers not to underestimate human grit and ingenuity, or our bond with man's best friend." Shaw had only been on the Brunali homeworld for a week, but had already grown sick of the sneering derision the aliens constantly heaped on humanity. The technologically advanced race had only begrudgingly permitted an Terran embassy as a token gesture, but that didn't stop them from openly deriding humans as uncultured savages at every opportunity. Shaw unclipped Ranger's harness and began unpacking his gear into the cramped bunk as the excitable working dog sniffed around the unfamiliar room. A sudden emergency klaxon blared over the intercom, red lights flashing. "Alert! Incoming ships detected. Clix invaders approaching the capital. This is not a drill. All personnel to battle stations." Shaw raced to the window and gaped at the sky in disbelief. A vast armada of jagged crystalline ships was descending through the clouds, raining plasma fire and missiles onto the city below. Mushroom clouds of smoke and debris spewed into the air as skyscrapers toppled. To Shaw's shock, the normally impenetrable Brunali defensive batteries remained ominously silent against the onslaught, not a single turret or missile battery firing back at the attackers. Alarms blared, and Brunali soldiers sprinted in panic through the streets. The Marine embassy door burst open as Ambassador Deneb staggered in, his regal robes shredded and stained blue with blood. "The Clix! They've crippled all our systems with a computer virus. Our shields are down, weapons offline, ships disabled. We're defenseless." "Please, you must help us repel the Clix invasion. The Brunali are doomed without aid from the human fleet." Lawrence Shaw looked down at the pleading alien, then over at Ranger sitting alert by his side. His lips curled into a grim smile. "Looks like it's time to show these crystal bastards what human marines and dogs can do, Ranger." Man and dog shared a resolute nod before Shaw grabbed his pulse rifle and the two raced out to meet the invasion head-on. The ambassador cowered on his knees, shaking palms outstretched in supplication. "You must use your Terran magic to save us. The Brunali will be slaughtered and enslaved without your help." For once there was no haughty derision in Deneb's voice, only pure, desperate terror. Shaw looked into those pleading alien eyes, and despite all the scorn the Brunali had heaped upon him, he saw a sapient being begging for salvation. With a curt nod, Shaw pushed aside his lingering resentment. Shaw sprinted to his locker, hurriedly donning his combat armor, the heavy plating snapping into place over his body. He snatched up his pulse rifle and sidearm, slapping in fresh power cells. A sharp whistle summoned Ranger to his side. The dog's ears pricked and alert. Together they rushed out to the embassy courtyard, a still-shaking Deneb trailing behind them. A Clix invasion force was marching up the boulevard, their crystalline armor glinting in the smoke-hazed sun. Deneb gaped at Shaw in disbelief, one finger pointed at Ranger. The Clix soldiers halted before the lone human and dog, raucous laughter emanating from their helmets. The Clix commander sneered through his violet helm slit. "A human and his pet come to face the might of the Clix Empire? Your bones will make fine additions to our trophy piles." Shaw stood firm, rifle cradled in his arms, as Ranger crouched in a predatory stance at his side. The Marine smiled coldly. 200 pounds of American fury trained to perfection. You're about to learn that the real monster ain't the one holding his leash." With a bellowed Ranger attack, Shaw unclipped the dog's lead. Ranger shot forward like a furry cruise missile, smashing into the Clix phalanx with the unstoppable force of a wrecking ball. Armored troopers flew through the air like discarded toys as Ranger tore through their ranks, his powerful jaws ripping through metal and flesh as if it were paper. The Clix unleashed a hail of plasma bolts at the dog, but Ranger jinked and juked through the firestorm, his incredible speed and reflexes rendering the alien's aim useless. Smoking craters pockmarked the street around the dog, but none found their mark. Shaw opened fire, his rifle cracking as armor-piercing slugs stitched a bloody line through the Click's formation. Crystalline helmets shattered and ruptured as Shaw drilled each target with pinpoint shots, the Marine calmly pivoting from one alien to the next. A Click's trooper took aim at Shaw's back, plasma rifle humming as it prepared to unleash a lethal bolt. But Ranger materialized behind the Click's as if teleporting, leaping and tearing out the alien's throat in a violet geyser. The few remaining invaders broke ranks, fleeing in abject terror from the Earth Dog, all discipline lost. They screamed warnings about the Terran hellhound as they ran. Deneb emerged from behind a marble pillar, eyes wide as he took in the scores of Click's corpses littering the street. Ranger sat in the middle of the carnage, tail wagging happily as Shaw tenderly scratched his ears. "That's one squad down. Only about 10,000 more to go," Shaw said grimly, slamming a new magazine into his pulse rifle. "Let's move, boy. We've got a whole damn planet to save." Shaw and Ranger pushed forward through the ruined city streets, pulse rifle and fangs at the ready. A squad of Brunali militia cautiously approached, their weapons lowered, but their posture tense. They eyed the human Marine warily, clearly uncertain about taking orders from an alien. Shaw met their gazes unflinchingly. "Look, I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm telling you to obey. You don't have to like it, but if you want to survive this shitstorm, you'll do exactly as I say, exactly when I say it. We clear?" The Brunali glanced at each other, then snapped to attention with crisp salutes. Shaw's blunt take-charge attitude seemed to reassure them. He quickly organized the aliens into a strike team, and they began methodically clearing the area, building by building. As they approached a Click stronghold, plasma bolts sizzled through the air. Shaw barked for the Brunali to lay down suppressing fire. One militiaman hesitated, terror etched on his face at the thought of revealing his position. Shaw rounded on him with a scowl. "Did I stutter? I said suppressing fire." Not waiting for a response, Shaw snatched Ranger's lead and dove straight through the window of the occupied structure. The building immediately erupted with the staccato crack of human gunfire, alien screams, and vicious snarling. Click soldiers poured out of doors and windows in a blind panic, only to be mercilessly cut down by the Brunali squad's plasma rifles. Moments later, Shaw and Ranger sauntered out of the building completely unscathed. The Brunali stared at the human in amazement, a newfound respect in their eyes. As the chaos of battle momentarily lulled, Shaw's keen ears picked up faint cries emanating from a collapsed building. He sprinted over and began frantically digging through the rubble, Ranger and the Brunali hot on his heels. They managed to extract a group of terrified Brunali children from the wreckage, their parents weeping with relief as they clutched their offspring tightly. The families turned to Shaw, gratitude shining in their eyes, but the Marine simply gave them a stoic nod before moving on to the next pile of debris, Ranger faithfully padding alongside him. As they walked, Shaw's radio crackled to life, a voice from the Brunali command post exclaiming in wonder, "By the gods, the human has done it. He's retaken the capital district." A grim smile tugged at Shaw's lips as he keyed his radio. "This is Lieutenant Lawrence Shaw, United States Space Marines. I'm headed your way with reinforcements. We're taking this planet back." Shaw's ragtag armored column rumbled into the Brunali command post, a cacophony of grinding treads, hydraulic hisses, and the excited chatter of the alien soldiers. As Shaw climbed out of his tank, Ranger leaping down beside him, the Marine was greeted by a sea of astonished Brunali faces. Their eyes flickered between Shaw and his loyal canine companion, a mixture of awe and disbelief etched on their angular features. Commander Zephyr, the ranking Brunali officer, stepped forward and snapped a crisp salute. His voice was tinged with a newfound respect as he addressed Shaw. "Lieutenant, I don't know how you did it, but you've given us a fighting chance. We're at your disposal." Shaw returned the salute with a curt nod, his face a mask of stoic determination. He wasted no time, immediately striding over to the tactical display and beginning to coordinate a planet-wide counterattack. His fingers danced across the holographic maps, marking key positions and troop movements with practiced efficiency. As they pored over the maps, Zephyr cleared his throat hesitantly. "Lieutenant, I mean no disrespect, but how did you and your beast accomplish so much on your own?" Shaw looked up, his eyes locking with Zephyr's. His voice was matter-of-fact, tinged with an undercurrent of pride. "Ranger's not a beast. He's a Marine, like me. Man's best friend, loyal to the end. On Earth, we've fought alongside dogs like him for thousands of years. There's no bond quite like it in the universe." Ranger sat at Shaw's feet, his ears pricked and alert, a living embodiment of the unbreakable bond between human and dog. The Brunali soldiers looked at the pair with a newfound understanding, a glimmer of hope kindling in their eyes. Suddenly an urgent message crackled over the comms. A Click's armored column was approaching the city, led by a gargantuan mechanical monstrosity bristling with weapons. Its bulk dwarfed the tanks around it, a mountain of metal and malice. Shaw frowned, his brow furrowing as he studied the tactical readout. Then slowly he looked down at Ranger, a glint of mischief in his eye. "Hey, boy, you up for a game of fetch?" Ranger leapt to his feet, his tail wagging furiously as he let out an excited bark. The Brunali soldiers exchanged confused glances, but Shaw merely grinned. Minutes later, Shaw led a cobbled-together force of human and Brunali tanks in a head-on charge against the Click's column. Plasma fire lit up the battlefield, sizzling through the air and scorching the earth. In the midst of the chaos, Shaw popped the hatch of his tank, Ranger held securely in his arms. Pointing at the Click supertank, Shaw shouted over the din of battle. "Ranger, see that big hunk of junk? Fetch!" With a bark of pure joy, Ranger leapt from Shaw's arms, hitting the ground at a full sprint. He wove through the maze of tanks, his fur singed by near misses from energy blasts. The Click's forces focused their fire on the charging dog, but Ranger was too quick, his reflexes too sharp. Reaching the rear of the gargantuan Click's machine, Ranger gathered himself and leapt, soaring through the air and disappearing into an exhaust port. For a moment, the only sounds were the boom of cannons and the crackle of plasma. Then the Click's monstrosity shuddered, smoke billowing from its seams. It ground to a halt, its weapons falling silent. An expectant hush fell over the battlefield. With a groan of straining metal, the main turret of the Click's tank slowly swiveled, coming to rest aimed squarely at the heart of the Click's column. A heartbeat passed. 2. The world erupted in fire as the commandeered Click's tank opened up on its former allies, its massive cannons roaring. The Click's forces were engulfed in a storm of plasma and shrapnel, their formation disintegrating under the onslaught. As the smoke began to clear, a small shape bounded out of the ruined supertank. Ranger, his fur blackened with soot, happily carried a sparking piece of wreckage in his jaws. The Brunali forces erupted in cheers as the dog sprinted back to shore, dropping the scrap metal at his feet with a joyful bark. Laughing, Shaw knelt and scratched Ranger behind the ears, the dog's tail wagging a mile a minute. Around them, the Brunali soldiers looked on in amazement, their faces alight with the first real hope they'd felt since the invasion began. Keying his radio, Shaw couldn't quite keep the smile out of his voice. "This is Lieutenant Shaw. Enemy armor division neutralized. We're clear to proceed with the main offensive." He glanced down at Ranger, who was looking up at him eagerly. "And Ranger says he's ready for walkies when we get back." But the Click still held a key spaceport, using it to ferry troops and supplies from their orbiting fleet. If the invaders maintained their orbital support, the hard-won gains could easily be reversed. The spaceport had to fall. Shaw and Ranger led the vanguard, charging the heavily fortified complex at the head of a mixed unit of human and Brunali soldiers. Plasma fire sizzled through the air, scouring the rockcrete around them. Shaw and Ranger moved like a well-oiled machine, the man's rifle barking in syncopation with the dog's powerful lunges and bites. Click soldiers fell before the duo, some perforated by Shaw's unerring shots, others savaged by Ranger's flashing teeth. Fighting their way into the heart of the spaceport, Shaw and Ranger finally kicked through the doors of the main control hub. Shaw rushed to the master console, his fingers flying across the holographic controls as he worked frantically to sever the uplink to the Click ships above. Ranger crouched by the door, ears cocked and nose twitching, an alert sentry. Just as the final cipher locked into place and the connection light winked out, the far wall exploded inwards. A massive Clix commander strode through the rubble, its armor bristling with spikes and trophies of past conquests. With a bellow that shook the room, it leveled its cannon at Shaw. Ranger didn't hesitate. With a snarl, the dog shot forward, powerful haunches coiled and released like a spring. He slammed into the Clix's chest plate with the force of a small car, teeth scrabbling for purchase on the polished alien alloy. But this Clix was a veteran of 100 campaigns, and it brutally backhanded Ranger across the room with its cannon arm. The dog hit the far wall with a pained yelp and crumpled to the floor. Red filled Shaw's vision, an icy rage colder and harder than the void between stars. He snatched his combat knife from its sheath and lunged at the Clix commander, a primal roar tearing from his throat. The two titans clashed in a whirlwind of slashing metal and sparking electronics, Shaw's blade a silvery blur as he hacked and cut at the Clix's armor. But the alien's size and strength were too much. A crushing blow sent Shaw sprawling, his knife skittering away across the deck. The Clix loomed over him, its cannon glowing hellish orange as it charged up to deliver the finishing blow. Suddenly a tan blur streaked across the room and latched onto the Clix's neck from behind. Ranger, his fur matted with purple blood, hung from the Clix's throat with grim determination, his teeth sunk to the gums in the alien's flesh. The Clix commander flailed and spun, massive hands grasping at the dog, but Ranger's jaws were locked tight. Shaw could hear the grating, splintering sound as the dog's powerful bite slowly crushed through the Clix's armored vertebrae. With a last desperate effort, Ranger wrenched his head sideways. A sickening crack echoed through the room and the Clix toppled forward, its head lolling at an unnatural angle. Ranger rolled clear, panting heavily, his muzzle stained violet. Slowly, painfully, Shaw pushed himself upright. Ranger limped over to his side, whining softly, and began to gently lick his battered face. "Good boy," Shaw croaked, wrapping his arms around Ranger's blood-slicked neck. "You saved my life. You really are the best friend a Marine could ask for." At that moment, the door burst open and Zephyr charged in, a squad of Brunali soldiers at his back. They skidded to a stop, eyes widening as they took in the scene, the savaged corpse of the Clix commander, the exhausted human and dog kneeling in a spreading pool of purple blood. Zephyr raised a hand to his ear, listening to his comms. Slowly, a grin of pure joy spread across his angular face. "Lieutenant, the Clix fleet just jumped out of orbit," he said, his voice shaking with amazement and relief. "They're retreating. We've won." The Brunali soldiers erupted into cheers, hugging each other and firing their rifles into the air in celebration. Shaw looked down at Ranger, who gazed back up at him, tongue lolling in a happy canine grin, despite the blood and bruises mottling his fur. "Hear that, boy?" Shaw asked softly, scratching Ranger behind the ears. "We did it. We saved an entire planet, you and me. Not bad for a primitive human and his pet, eh?" Ranger barked once, tail wagging weakly, and laid his head on Shaw's knee. Shaw leaned back against the shell of a shattered console and closed his eyes, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It was a smile of victory, of vindication, of a job well done against impossible odds. But most of all, it was a smile of pure love and gratitude for the loyal companion at his side, the friend who had been with him through hell and back. The friend who would always be there, no matter what the universe threw at them. Shaw and Ranger stood atop a hastily erected stage in the heart of the Brunali capital, a sea of cheering aliens stretching out before them. Deneb approached, a glittering medal held reverently in his hands. The once haughty ambassador now radiated humility and respect. "Lieutenant Lawrence Shaw, in recognition of your unparalleled bravery and the unbreakable bond you share with your loyal companion, it is my great honor to present you with the highest accolade of the Brunali people, the Star of Valor." Deneb carefully pinned the star-shaped medal to Shaw's battle-scarred armor, his hands trembling slightly with emotion. Ranger sat tall and proud at Shaw's side, his own fur still matted with dried Clix blood. "You and your noble companion have taught us a profound lesson," Deneb continued, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. Valor, loyalty, and heart are not measured by the height of one's form or the sophistication of their technology, but by the depth of their spirit. We are proud to call humanity our friends and allies. Shaw, moved by the sincerity in Deneb's words, reached out and clasped the ambassador's hand firmly. On behalf of the United States Space Marines and all of Earth, I thank you. We came here hoping to forge bonds of friendship and cooperation between our peoples. Though the circumstances were dire, I believe we've achieved that goal, humans and Brunali, standing side by side against the darkness. Just as the crowd erupted into another round of cheers, Shaw's wristcom beeped urgently. His brow furrowed as he read the message, a grim shadow falling across his face. To the Cliques, Shaw replied grimly. Enraged by their defeat here, they've launched a surprise attack on the Sol system. Earth's defenses are holding for now, but they're in dire need of reinforcements. He looked up at Deneb, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. Ambassador, Earth needs our help. I know we've only just beaten back the Cliques here, but I must ask, will the Brunali stand with humanity in our hour of need, as we stood with you? Within hours, Shaw found himself on the bridge of a Brunali warship, Ranger at his side leading a combined human and Brunali armada as they raced towards Sol at maximum FTL speed. The stars streaked past the viewports in blurred lines of light. As a familiar blue-green orb appeared on the view screen, Shaw felt a surge of emotions, pride, protectiveness, and a steely resolve. He looked down at Ranger, the dog's keen eyes fixed on the image of their threatened homeworld. Ranger barked enthusiastically, his tail wagging with eager anticipation. Shaw grinned, reaching down to scratch his loyal friend behind the ears. That's what I thought. Let's give the Cliques a good old-fashioned Earth welcome they won't soon forget. He turned to the Brunali captain, a hard glint in his eye. All ships, battle stations, prepare to drop out of FTL on my mark. It's time we show these crystal bastards what happens when you mess with humanity's home turf. As klaxons began to blare and crews rushed to their posts, Shaw felt a familiar calm settle over him, the calm of a warrior ready to do what must be done. The calm before the storm. Shaw's fingers flew across the tactical display, dispatching wings of fighter craft and coordinating volleys of ship-to-ship fire with crisp efficiency. The bridge of the flagship hummed with activity, crew members shouting status reports and targeting coordinates. Outside the viewports, the void of space blazed with the light of 1,000 suns as human, Brunali, and Cliques ships traded devastating broadsides at point-blank range. A particularly vicious salvo rocked the flagship, throwing Shaw against his command chair. Ranger braced himself against the tremors, his claws scrabbling for purchase on the deck plating. The tactical officer called out, his voice tight with tension. Sir, sensors are picking up a massive energy signature approaching from the far side of the Cliques fleet. Sir, it's a dreadnought, the biggest I've ever seen. Shaw's eyes narrowed as he studied the readouts scrolling across his screen. The dreadnought was a behemoth, easily dwarfing the largest ships in the Allied fleet. Its hull bristled with planet-cracking superweapons, each one capable of reducing a world to molten slag. And it was moving into firing position, its guns swiveling to aim directly at Earth. If that thing gets within range, it'll crack Earth open like an egg, Shaw growled. We have to take it out now. As the Allied ships moved to engulf the dreadnought, Shaw turned to his strike team, a hand-picked group of the toughest human and Brunali commandos. We're not going to be able to destroy that thing from the outside. We need to get in there, fight our way to the reactor core and blow it sky high. It's going to be tight quarters and heavy resistance. You up for it? The commandos responded with grim nods, checking their weapons and equipment. Ranger stood at attention, his hackles raised and teeth bared, ready for battle. Shaw gave a curt nod in return. The strike team piled into the heavily armored assault shuttle, Shaw taking the controls as Ranger settled into the co-pilot's seat. With a roar of engines, the shuttle leapt from the flagship's hangar bay, hurtling towards the looming dreadnought. Immediately, a storm of anti-aircraft fire filled the void. energy blasts and shrapnel whipping past the shuttle's canopy. Shaw jinked and juked the craft, his hands a blur on the control yoke. The shuttle corkscrewed through a particularly dense barrage of fire, its hull pinging as shrapnel ricocheted off the armored plating. Shaw gritted his teeth, lining up on one of the dreadnought's cavernous hangar bays. A bone-jarring impact shuddered through the craft as it skidded along the hangar deck, shedding armor panels in a shower of sparks. The strike team poured out of the shuttle, weapons blazing. Click's warriors swarmed to meet them, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. The hangar dissolved into a vicious close-quarters battle, commandos and Clicks grappling in hand-to-hand combat amidst the twisted wreckage of spacecraft. Shaw and Ranger fought side by side, rifle and fangs flashing in perfect synchronicity. They pushed forward relentlessly, leading the strike team in a desperate charge through the bowels of the massive ship. Bulkheads and blast doors shuddered under the onslaught of grenades and breaching charges as the team blasted their way deeper into the dreadnought. As they neared the main reactor chamber, a searing blast of plasma fire ripped through the corridor. Shaw dove for cover, feeling the heat of the energy bolt singe his hair as it passed. A massive bulkhead crashed down from the ceiling, the twisted metal separating Shaw and Ranger from the rest of the strike team. Shaw pounded his fist against the immovable bulkhead in frustration, then keyed his calm. Shaw to strike team, the bulkhead sealed, no way through. Complete the mission, get to the reactor core. We'll find another way around. Shaw out. Turning to Ranger, Shaw gave a grim smile. Looks like it's just you and me, boy. Let's move. Man and dog raced through the labyrinthine corridors of the dreadnought, the echoing tramp of Click's reinforcements always just behind them. They burst into the cavernous reactor chamber, plasma bolts crisscrossing the air around them. Shaw sprinted to the main control panel, his fingers flying over the keys as he worked to initiate a core overload. Behind him, Ranger leapt and dodged, his powerful jaws crushing Click's armor and flesh, as he fought to keep the warriors away from Shaw. The reactor began to hum ominously, the chamber filling with a pulsing red light as the overload sequence started. Just as Shaw entered the final command, a searing lance of pain erupted in his chest. He looked down to see a smoking hole in his armor, the edges of the wound charred and blackened. His legs gave out and he collapsed to the deck, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Ranger was at his side in an instant, whining in concern as he nosed at Shaw's face. With a titanic effort, Shaw dragged himself into cover behind a bank of power conduits, leaving a smear of blood on the deck plating. Ranger crouched over him protectively, his fur standing on end as he growled at the approaching Clicks. Shaw fumbled with his gauntlet, his blood-slicked fingers struggling to hit the right keys. The overload warning klaxon began to blare, red emergency lights pulsing in time with the wailing siren. He let his head fall back against the conduit, a wry smile on his face. "We did it, boy," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the alarms and the rising whine of the overloading reactor. "We saved Earth. Not bad for a day's work, eh?" Ranger whined softly, pressing his nose against Shaw's cheek. The Marine weakly lifted a hand, ruffling the fur behind the dog's ears. Around them, the reactor shook and shuddered, the temperature in the chamber rising to unbearable levels as the containment fields began to fail. Shaw closed his eyes, his hand still tangled in Ranger's fur. The dog curled around him, shielding his fallen master with his own body as the world around them dissolved into a blinding maelstrom of light and heat. The bridge of the human flagship erupted in cheers as the Click's dreadnought vanished in a titanic explosion, the shockwave rattling the Allied fleet. But the jubilation quickly turned to tense silence as the sensor officer called out, "No sign of Lieutenant Shaw or Ranger's life signs." Captain Hawkins gripped the armrests of her command chair, knuckles white. "Scan the debris field again. They have to be out there somewhere." Agonizing minutes ticked by as the sensors probed the wreckage until finally, "Captain, I've got a faint transponder signal. It's Shaw's emergency beacon." Hawkins was already in motion. "Launch rescue shuttles immediately. I want eyes on that beacon now." At last the shuttle pilot's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, we've got them. Lieutenant Shaw is badly wounded, but he's alive. Ranger too, the tough son of a bitch. We're bringing them in now." A ragged cheer went up from the crew, relief palpable in the air. Medics met the shuttle in the hangar bay, Shaw's broken body carefully loaded onto a gurney. But as they rushed him towards the medbay, Ranger limped determinedly alongside, refusing to leave his master's side despite his own injuries. In the stark white of the medbay, doctors swarmed around Shaw, desperately working to stabilize him. Ranger whimpered softly, gently nosing Shaw's limp hand. As if sensing his faithful companion's presence, Shaw's eyes fluttered open. He looked down at Ranger, a ghost of a smile on his bloodied lips. "Hey, boy," he rasped weakly. "We made it. Knew a little reactor explosion wouldn't keep us down." Ranger's tail wagged once, twice, as if in agreement, before he rested his muzzle on the gurney, watchful eyes never leaving Shaw's face as the doctors fought to save his life. In the days that followed, as Shaw struggled to recover in the medbay, whispers of his and Ranger's heroism spread like wildfire through the fleet. Demoralized Brunali troops, hearing of the human and his dog's impossible feat, found new reserves of courage and resolve. Inspired by the legend of Shaw and Ranger, the Allied forces struck back against the cliques with renewed ferocity. Brunali ships and soldiers fought with a tenacity and skill they had never before realized, stunning the overconfident cliques. On the bridge of the flagship, Ranger became a galvanizing presence, his stalwart figure a living symbol of the bond between human and Brunali. Crew morale soared whenever the noble dog was present, his quiet strength a constant reminder of the heroism that had turned the tide. As Shaw's wounds slowly knitted, he threw himself into the war effort with single-minded intensity, coordinating fleet movements and ground assaults from his bed. And always, Ranger was there, a silent guardian and steadfast companion. Under Shaw's brilliant strategic guidance, the Allied fleet began to steadily roll back the clique's advance. One by one, enslaved worlds were liberated, their peoples rallying to the Allied cause. The once unstoppable clique's juggernaut faltered, then crumbled, as humanity and Brunali struck with relentless precision. Reeling from defeat after crushing defeat, the battered remains of the clique's armada fell back to their home system, clinging to their last bastion. As the Allies paused to regroup and rearm for the final push, Shaw stood on the observation deck, looking out over the assembled might of the free galaxy. Ranger padded to his side, sitting attentively at his feet. Shaw looked down at his faithful friend, a soft smile on his face. Ranger looked up at him, brown eyes full of unwavering loyalty and love. Whatever came next, they would face it as they always had, side by side, unto the end. As the Allied fleet dropped out of FTL on the fringes of the clique's home system, Shaw stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes narrowed as he took in the daunting sight before them. The clique's homeworld hung in space like a malevolent jewel, its surface obscured by a bristling shell of orbiting battle stations. Linked by a pulsing network of energy relays, the defense platforms formed an impenetrable barrier, their massive plasma cannons primed and ready. Ranger whined softly, sensing the tension in his master's posture. Shaw absently reached down to ruffle the dog's fur, his mind racing as he studied the tactical readouts scrolling across the view screen. "Those relays are the key," he muttered. "Take them out and the battle stations will be sitting ducks, but getting to them won't be easy. They'll be heavily guarded." Shaw turned to face the assembled bridge crew, human and Brunali alike. "I'll need a small team, the best we've got. We'll slip in quiet, hit those relays before they know what's happening. It's risky, but it's our only shot." As the infiltration team assembled in the hangar bay, Ranger pawed at Shaw's leg insistently, his brown eyes wide with worry. Shaw knelt down, wrapping his arms around the dog in a tight hug. "Sorry, boy, not this time," he murmured into Ranger's fur. "This mission is too dangerous, even for us. I need you to stay here and keep an eye on things, okay? You're in charge until I get back." As Shaw's team made their silent approach to the clique's homeworld, the main Allied fleet launched a blistering diversionary attack, drawing the attention of the clique's defenses. Lances of plasma crisscrossed the void as the battle stations opened fire, their shields flaring under the onslaught of Allied missiles. Slipping through the chaos undetected, Shaw's shuttle ghosted into the planet's atmosphere. hugging the rugged terrain to avoid sensor detection. They set down in a narrow ravine, the shuttle's adaptive camouflage rendering it nearly invisible against the rock. Clad in matte black stealth armor and armed to the teeth, Shaw and his team emerged into the harsh glare of the alien sun. Towering spires of dark metal rose in the distance, pulsing with malevolent energy, the power relays. "All right, listen up," Shaw growled. "We do this fast and quiet, split into teams, hit the relays simultaneously. Plant the charges, then get the hell out. Rendezvous at the extraction point. And watch your backs. You can bet those relays will have some nasty guards." With silent nods, the infiltrators split up and vanished into the jagged landscape, moving with the fluid grace of ghosts. Shaw took point for his team, leading them in a swift, silent advance towards their target. As they neared the relay, a shimmering curtain of energy sprang to life around it, and a phalanx of black-armored Clix warriors materialized from the shadows, plasma blades igniting with a sinister hiss. Shaw reacted instantly, his rifle snapping up and barking as he drilled the lead warrior between the eyes. The Clix crumpled, and then all hell broke loose. Plasma bolts filled the air as Shaw and his team dove for cover, the sizzling energy bursts chewing into the rock around them. Shaw rolled to his feet, already firing, his shots unerringly finding gaps in the Clix armor. But the Clix were elite for a reason, and they pressed their attack with relentless ferocity, slowly forcing the humans back. Shaw ducked as a plasma blade scythed over his head, the heat of it scorching his face. He rammed the butt of his rifle into the Clix's chest, knocking it back, then put a burst into its faceplate at point-blank range. All around him his team fought with desperate skill, but the Clix were too many, too strong. One by one the humans fell, until only Shaw was left, a lone figure in black surrounded by a ring of advancing Clix. With a roar of defiance, Shaw charged forward, blasting with his rifle. He took down 3 Clix before a plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Another bolt burned into his thigh, and he fell to one knee, his rifle clattering away. The Clix closed in, blades raised for the kill. Shaw stared up at them, teeth bared in a bloody grin. "Come on then, you crystal bastards," he snarled. "Let's dance." But before the Clix could strike, a howling black shape burst from the shadows, hitting the aliens like a wrecking ball of fur and fury. Ranger was a whirlwind of teeth and claws, ripping into the Clix with savage abandon. Armor shattered and violet blood sprayed as the dog tore through the warriors, a snarling avatar of vengeance. Shaw watched in amazement as Ranger decimated the Clix, the battle over in seconds. The dog bounded over to Shaw, licking his face frantically as if checking for injuries. "Good boy," Shaw murmured, burying his face in Ranger's fur. "You saved my ass again. Guess I should know better than to leave you behind, huh?" Leaning on Ranger for support, Shaw limped to the power relay, planting the last of his charges. The explosion lit up the alien sky, the relay toppling in a gout of flame and debris. All around the planet, the other relays fell in synchronized blasts, the infiltration teams completing their mission with ruthless efficiency. The Clix battle stations shuddered, their shields flickering and dying as their power supply was severed. On the flagship bridge, a great cheer went up as the tactical display lit up green, showing the Clix defenses crumbling. Brunali and human officers clapped each other on the back, laughing with the relief of a plan well executed. But the jubilation was short-lived. A panicked transmission crackled over the comms, one of the infiltration teams reporting contact with a massive hidden Clix force on the planet's surface. Outgunned and outnumbered, the team was being rapidly overwhelmed, their extraction point compromised. Shaw heard the transmission as he and Ranger fought their way towards the rendezvous, dispatching pockets of Clix resistance with grim efficiency. He keyed his mic, his voice rough with fatigue and pain. "This is Shaw. All teams fall back to secondary extraction. I'll draw their fire, buy you some time." Ignoring the protests of his men, Shaw turned to Ranger. "Looks like it's just you and me again, boy. You up for one last fight?" Ranger barked sharply, his stance proud and eager. Together, man and dog charged toward the sound of battle, ready to make their final stand. The space around the clique's homeworld blazed with weapons fire as the human Brunali armada unleashed a storm of devastation on the planet's surface. Warships the size of cities pounded the clique's defenses with unrelenting fury, clouds of missiles and energy beams reducing once mighty fortresses to rubble. The clique's fleet, already depleted from the relentless campaign, crumbled under the onslaught, ships breaking apart and tumbling into the atmosphere in blazing trails of debris. On the bridge of the Allied flagship, Shaw watched the destruction unfold with grim satisfaction, Ranger standing alert at his side. But even as the last clique's stronghold fell, a sudden shrill alarm sounded from the sensor station. "Sir, we're detecting a massive energy surge from beneath the planet's surface. It's off the charts." Shaw rushed over, his eyes widening as he read the data scrolling across the screen. "My God, it's a black hole generator. The cliques have activated a doomsday device." He spun to face the bridge crew, his voice sharp with urgency. "If that thing reaches full power, it'll rip open a singularity that will consume this entire system. We have to stop it, now." Within minutes, Shaw was leading a desperate assault on the clique's command bunker. A strike team of human and Brunali commandos at his back and Ranger at his side. They blasted their way through the outer defenses, energy bolts and shrapnel filling the air as they clashed with the fanatical clique's guardians. The bunker's interior was a maze of dimly lit corridors and fortified chambers, echoing with the clatter of weapons fire and the screams of the dying. Shaw and Ranger fought at the head of the formation, rifle and fangs flashing in lethal harmony as they cut a bloody path deeper into the complex. At last they reached the central chamber, a cavernous vault housing the pulsing, malevolent form of the doomsday device, and standing before it, clad in ornate battle armor and wielding a crackling energy glaive, was the imposing figure of the clique's Emperor. "You're too late, human," the Emperor snarled, his voice distorted by his helmet's vocoder. "The device is already powering up. In minutes this system will be consumed, and your precious alliance will be ash." Shaw stepped forward, bringing his rifle to bear. "Not on my watch." The Emperor lunged, his glaive slicing through the air. Shaw parried with his rifle, the weapons clash sending a shower of sparks cascading across the room. They traded blows in a deadly dance, moving with a speed and ferocity that blurred the line between combat and art. Behind them, Ranger and the commandos fought a desperate holding action against the Emperor's elite guard, buying Shaw the time he needed. The device pulsed with increasing intensity, the room shaking with each throb of power. Just as the duel reached a fevered pitch, the Emperor fainted low and swept Shaw's legs, sending him crashing to the floor. The glaive stabbed down, its point aimed at Shaw's throat, but before it could find its mark, a blur of fur and fury slammed into the Emperor. Ranger latched onto the alien's neck, his powerful jaws crushing armor and flesh. The Emperor roared in pain and rage, dropping his glaive and frantically scrabbling at the dog with armored gauntlets. With a brutal heave, he tore Ranger free and hurled him across the room, the dog's body striking the wall with a sickening thud. But Ranger's sacrifice had given Shaw the opening he needed. Snatching up the fallen glaive, Shaw surged to his feet and rammed the crackling blade through the Emperor's chest with all his strength. The Emperor convulsed, a scream of agony ripping from his throat as Shaw pushed harder, driving him back. With a final, desperate effort, Shaw ripped the glaive free and slammed its pommel into the Emperor's helmet, shattering the crystalline faceplate. The Emperor toppled backwards, his body smashing into the doomsday device's control panel in a shower of sparks and shattered crystal. The device shuddered, its pulsing light flickering erratically. Warning klaxons blared as the chamber began to shake itself apart. "Chair's going to blow everyone out now," Shaw yelled, scooping up Ranger's limp form and sprinting for the exit. The commandos needed no encouragement, running pell-mell through the crumbling bunker. They burst from the entrance just as the ground heaved beneath their feet. The bunker imploded with a roar, a geyser of flame and debris erupting from the earth. The shockwave hurled Shaw from his feet, and he curled protectively around Ranger as they tumbled across the shattered ground. As the dust slowly settled, Shaw staggered upright, cradling Ranger in his arms. The dog stirred weakly, a soft whine escaping his throat. Around them, the wreckage of the clique's command center smoldered, the once mighty edifice reduced to blasted rubble. In the skies above, the Allied fleet soared in victory formation, the sun glinting off their hulls. Soldiers began to land in dropships, humans and Brunali mixing together as they secured the area. As medics rushed to tend to the wounded, a great cheer rose from the gathered troops, a cry of victory and relief. But Shaw couldn't join in the celebration. Ranger's blood matted his fur, his breathing shallow and labored. Shaw sank to his knees, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "Stay with me, boy. Don't you dare leave me now. That's an order." But even as the medics crowded around, working frantically to stabilize the grievously wounded dog, Shaw knew in his heart that this was a battle even Ranger might not win. The price of victory, paid in blood and friendship. In the hours that followed, as the Allied forces worked to secure the planet and aid the shell-shocked clique's civilians, Shaw refused to leave Ranger's side. He sat in the makeshift medbay, holding his friend's paw as the doctors fought to repair the damage. Through the long, agonizing night, as soldiers celebrated and mourned in equal measure, Shaw whispered to Ranger, recounting their adventures, telling him over and over what a good boy he was, how much he meant to him. And Ranger, ever the fighter, clung to life. His tail thumped weakly whenever Shaw spoke, even as the monitors beeped their dire warnings. As dawn broke over the shattered world, painting the rubble in shades of gold, Ranger finally stirred. His eyes flickered open, meeting Shaw's red-rimmed gaze. Shaw let out a choked laugh, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "There you are, knew you were too stubborn to quit." Ranger licked Shaw's hand, his tail wagging with the barest of movements. It was a small gesture, but it said more than words ever could. In the days that followed, as the Alliance worked to stabilize the clique system and the galaxy beyond, Shaw and Ranger became living legends. The story of the human and his dog, who had stopped a doomsday weapon and ended a war spread like wildfire, an inspiration to soldiers and civilians alike. But for Shaw, the accolades and honors meant little. Kneeling before Ranger in a quiet moment amidst the chaos, he pressed his forehead to the dog's, his voice rough with emotion. "We did it, boy. We saved them all, but God, the cost. I don't know if I have it in me to keep fighting. I think it's time for us to go home." Ranger whined softly, nuzzling into Shaw's touch. In that moment, an understanding passed between them, a bond deeper than any orders or oaths. When the Alliance High Command offered Shaw a promotion and a new command, he politely but firmly declined. It was time, he said, for a new generation of heroes to take up the fight. And so, with little fanfare, Shaw and Ranger boarded a transport bound for Earth. As the ship lifted off, the assembled soldiers, human and Brunali alike, snapped to attention, rendering a final salute to the departing heroes. The transport rose into the sky, leaving the war-torn planet behind. Shaw leaned back in his seat, Ranger's head resting on his lap. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the lines of stress and fatigue on his face softened. "We're going home, boy. No more fighting, no more war. Just you, me, and a quiet little place somewhere green. How's that sound?" Ranger's tail thumped against the seat, his eyes bright with understanding and love. As the ship accelerated towards the stars, man and dog looked to the future, to a peace they had earned 1,000 times over. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.